Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I'm going to be your host today. I'm Rajdeep Pune. I'm the co-founder and CEO at ReWiser. I did my engineering from BITS Pilani. I graduated in 2015, and right after that, I started ReWiser. For today's webinar, we're going to talk about everything about SATs, ACTs, and APs exams. So these are the three major exams that we're going to cover. So predominantly, our focus is on the study abroad space. So I believe the parents and the families that have joined us are looking to send their kids abroad for their undergrad studies, or they're looking to explore this as an option. I think this will be a good webinar for those parents. The format is going to be very simple. For the first 35 to 40 minutes, I'm going to walk you guys through my presentation, and post that, we will open the forum for Q&As. Feel free to put in your question in the chat section. We will take up all your questions towards the end. A few people from my team are also there in the group. They might keep answering your questions in between as well if they find something useful. And at the same point of time, later on, if you would like, you could also set up a one-on-one meetings with us. We'll be happy to connect and talk to you guys. Right? With that, let me quickly deep dive into and revise what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about 4 major pillars of strong college application. We'll talk about what is the right time to start doing anything and everything if you're looking to go outside of India. Though we are largely focused on US today, but we'll also talk about US, UK, Canada, Singapore, Hong Kong, and India as a geography as well. What are the different standardized tests? SATs, ACT, AP, when should you do it? Should you do it? Should you not write it? What is the right time to do it? What is the right time to prepare for it? And what is the new digital SAT format that the students will have to give right now, right? So I think these are the portions that we're going to cover in today's webinar. With that, let me give a quick introduction about the company. So ReWiser is a high school support company that assists students worldwide achieve their high school academic goal. We largely help students from grade 9 to grade 12. We also, in some cases, work with grade 7 and grade 8 students. Within the company, we help students in 2 different verticals. The first one is test prep, where we help students with SAT prep, ACT prep, AP exam prep. And on the other side, we also help students with academic tutoring, where we do IGCSE, IB, A-level subject tutoring as well. And we do this for almost about 13 subjects. So these are 2 main verticals where we have helped students. We have helped families, about 4,000 odd families in the last 7 years. We've been helping students across 15 plus cities within India and about 8 plus countries across the globe. That's what we have been doing over the last 7 years. Currently, a lot of our students have been placed into top universities, be it MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Berkeley, Princeton, Purdue, and so on and so forth. Right? With that, let's deep dive into today's agenda, and let's try and understand what are the 4 major pillars of college application. Right? I think one thing which is very, very important, I want to set the premise here, is that what's the fundamental difference between when you're looking to study in India versus study outside of India, right? So I think the major fundamental difference is, if you're looking to study in India, you're preparing for the exams. For example, you're writing JEE for engineering, you're writing NEET for medicine, and you're writing CUET and so on and so forth, right? So these are the exams that you will end up writing at the end of grade 12. However, it is very different when you're looking to go abroad, because your prep has to start a lot earlier than that. There are 4 major pillars that colleges are looking for in your college application. First is academics. And when I talk about academics, they are looking at grades from grade 9th, grade 10th, grade 11, your actual scores, and your grade 12th predicted scores. So your grades from all the 4 years are super important, right? So I think that's an important part. 70% of your profile or 70% of your admission depends on this academics, right? So anybody who says academics is not important for study abroad is not right at all. Academics are the most important factor, whether it's study in India or outside of India. So if there are students who are attending this webinar, please make sure you try and get the best, right? Whatever your best is, right? I'm not saying everybody should get 100%, but try and get your best. So 9th, 10th, 11th actual scores, and your 12th grade predicted scores. What are predicted scores? So when you're in grade 12, because when you're applying to outside of India, you end up applying while you are in grade 12 itself, right? So you'll start applying in August, September of your grade 12. By the time you have not done your grade 12, right? And hence, the school where you're going in, they will predict a score for you saying, hey, you know what, Rajdeep will get 95% in the exam, right? And this score will go to the college. So for grade 12, it's a predicted score that matters. Second pillar is standardized test. And under standardized test, there are multiple exams that one has to write. SATs and ACTs. So these are one important exam that you have to figure out. Should you be writing an SAT or should you be doing an ACT? And that's going to be the main agenda for our today's webinar. By the end of today's webinar, we would want you guys to be informed enough about these two tests so that you are able to take an informed decision whether your kid should be doing an SAT or an ACT, and why should they be doing that test, right? I think that's going to be the main key takeaway from our today's webinar. The other standardized tests is APs, which are advanced placement courses. We will try and cover a bit of it in today's webinar, though that itself is a huge topic, but we will not be able to cover everything, but we will definitely try and touch base on it. So that's on the standardized test. The third important pillar in your college application is profile building, right? Now, I know, when I do this in seminar setting, I keep asking parents about this question, saying, what is profile building as per you, right? And I think I keep getting different answers from different people. For some people, profile building is extracurricular activities. For some people, it's internship. For some people, it is research. For some people, it is community service, social activity, participating in competitions. All of this put together is your profile, right? Which is correct, right? So all these are different things that you could do to make your profile. However, having said that, what is profile building, right? So profile building is nothing but an instrument to showcase to the college that I'm good at doing something, right? For example, if I want to pursue computer science engineering in college, now I need to show to the college that I'm good at it. I'm genuinely interested in doing computer science. And how do you do that? You do that by doing multiple activities. That could be through projects, that could be through internship, that could be through research work, that could be through community service. You could mix your passion and you could mix your interest, right? Once you figure out your passion and your interest, and then you do something, I think that will really help you in building your profile. So profile building, don't just consider profile building like a checklist, right? Okay, I need to have a sports, I need to have a music, I need to have dance class. No, that's not gonna help, right? Profile building is an overall holistic thing that is really, really important, right? So that's the third component and the third major pillar in your college application, which is profile building, which happens as early as grade 9. So you should be doing this across grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12. The fourth pillar in our college application is your college application itself, which happens in grade 12, which includes shortlisting of universities. What are the right universities that you need to apply to? Once you have shortlisted your universities, then you will be submitting your essays. Every university that you apply to, you are submitting at least 2 to 3 essays. So let's say if you end up applying to 10 universities, you're submitting at least about 30 essays, right? So I think that is super, super important. So writing essays are a critical component. So writing in itself is a critical component in your entire study abroad journey. And then letter of recommendations and so on are the other factors that you will have to look at in your college application, but that's only towards grade 12. So these are 4 major pillars that you really need to think about. One is academics, second is standardized test, third is profile building, fourth is college application. As long as your 4 pillars are sorted, you're good to apply to the college, right? Now, having said that, let me deep dive into the second component, which is the standardized test. And with that, let me pick up the first test, which is the SAT, right? As I'm sure most of you are aware that SAT has recently changed their pattern. And starting this March, SAT has gone digital. It's no longer a pen and paper test. It's a digital online test. The duration of exam is 2 hours, 14 minutes. There are 2 sections in the test. One is English, which has reading and writing as a component, and another one is math. So these are the only 2 sections that you will have now. It's required by most US colleges. And at the same time, it helps in many other geographies. So these are 2 important statements. Let me try and go deep into it. Why do I say it's required by most US colleges? Because I say most. So there are these terms which are very important for you to understand, maybe keep a note of it. First one is, there's a term called test blind, and then there's a term called test optional, right? So what is test blind? Any college, if you go to their undergrad college website, admissions website, you will realize some colleges will say we are test blind. That basically means even if you have done the SAT exam and you submit it, they will still not look at your scores. So they are test blind. So they are blind towards your score, right? So that is test blind college. All colleges in California, all universities in California are test blind, right? And they have been blind from last 5-6 years. There's nothing new about it, right? So that's one. Second is test optional. Now, what is test optional? Any university which say we are test optional, what do they refer to? They basically mean if in case you have done the SAT, please submit the scores and we will consider it. If you have not done it, then you can skip it as well. However, test optional is a very pandemic phenomena. What really happened during the pandemic, there were a lot of countries across Africa and other places where SAT could not happen because of the pandemic. And hence college board or colleges came forward and they said, we want to give equal opportunities to everybody. And even if you have not done the SAT, it's completely fine. And we would waive off the SAT, right? So that is test optional. However, in the last 2 years, what we have really observed, any student who has not submitted the SAT scores to a college was at a disadvantage versus the students who have submitted the scores, especially if you're applying from India, right? And the reason is very simple, right? So think about it. If there are 10 students who have applied to a particular college from India, and 6 have submitted the SAT and 4 have not, then how do these 4 justify of not doing the SAT, right? I mean, there is no way they can justify of not doing the SAT and the other 6 were able to do it, right? And hence it's important to make sure if you see test optional anywhere, consider it by default that you have to write this exam, right? It's only test blind where you don't have to submit this score, right? So the thumb rule that you can follow here is, because a lot of parents ask me this question that my child is in grade 9th or grade 10th right now and I don't know which colleges will I apply to, which is the reality, right? And in that case I would say write your exam and keep the SAT scores so that if in case you need it, then you can submit it. If you don't need it, you can skip it, right? That's our general advice. Second statement that I made here is helps in many other geographies. What do I mean by that? Many other geographies, right? So apart from US, Canada, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, India, there are a lot of other countries across the globe which also accept SAT scores. So it's not just in US, though it may not be mandatory there, but if in case you have done this exam and you have performed well, you should submit the score because it will help you in terms of the admission and also in some cases in terms of scholarship. Now coming back to the SAT again, as I said, this is a digital SAT exam, which is going to be adaptive in nature. So new SAT is adaptive. What do I mean by adaptiveness? It is sectional adaptive. So let's say depending on your performance in first section, your next section will get decided. So for example, we are 60 people right now on this webinar. If all 60 of us write the exam today, our test paper 1, right? Our first module of, let's say, English will have the same set of questions. However, depending on our performance in first section, our difficulty level of second paper will get decided, right? So that is called adaptiveness. I know some of you might have questions, then how do scoring works, right? So I'll come to that. We have it in the next slides. As I said, it'll be adaptive. It'll only have 2 sections instead of 4 that used to be there earlier. You can actually use your own device, which is, I know might look very, very silly right now, but I've had students. So ACT, which is another competitive exam to SAT, in that you are not allowed to use your own system. And I have had cases where students have come back and said, we didn't like the system got shut down in between, there were issues, there were glitches and so on and so forth. So hence SAT has learned from those mistakes and they said you are allowed to use your own devices. There'll be a clock on the screen to assess the time management, which is again a welcome move. I've had students in the past who complained I forgot to carry my watches, and because of that I couldn't manage my time really well. So that's a welcome move. You can easily move between the questions. So because you have an option to move between the question, because it's digital exam, you can flag the question and come back to the question as and when you want. So I think that is again very, very important. You are allowed to use your maths formula all throughout and they are accessible all at one place. That's again a welcome move in SAT. Apart from that, the test is going to be shorter. It will only last 2 hours and 14 minutes. From the content perspective, you will have longer reading passages. So earlier what used to happen, there were long reading passages and pertaining to each passage, there are about 10 to 12 questions, right? Now that has changed completely, right? Now, instead of the entire passage, you will have a para. You'll have one para and one question. So you'll have one para, one question segment all throughout the reading section, which is again a welcome change because now you don't have to retain so much of content by the end of the test, right? So I think that is again a welcome move. Questions are a lot more concise and straightforward. You have more time per question and you have lesser number of questions, which is again a welcome move. You're allowed to use calculator all throughout the math section, which is again a welcome move. Earlier in the pen and paper version, there was a pen and paper section, there was a calculator section and a no calculator section, and a lot of students who follow international curriculum like IGCSE and IB used to kind of struggle with it because they're not very comfortable of not using the calculator, right? So this is again a welcome change for those students. Scores are available in days and not weeks. So earlier, the score used to come out almost after a week, 10 days period, but now it comes out much earlier, almost in about 3 to 4 days, which is again a good welcome move. Now coming back to adaptiveness, right? So I think we talked about the adaptiveness and I said, how does the scoring work? So let me try and help you understand that, right? So as I said, there are two sections, right? So in English, there are two sections, section 1 and section 2. In section 1, all of us, and I've called it as stage 1 there, right? So all of us have the same set of papers. Let's assume I got 6 out of 20. Let's assume there are 20 questions and I got 6 out of 20. That means my stage 2 question paper is going to be easier. However, having said that, my performance in stage 1 has also decided my upper limit and lower limit of my final score. The maximum that I can get out of 800 is only 560. The minimum that I can get is 440. Right? So I think that is very, very important. Now, irrespective of how I perform in stage 2, if I do really, really well, I can get maximum 560. If I do badly, then I can get a 440. However, if let's say someone else writes it and they get 16 out of 20, in stage 2, their minimum score is 680, maximum is 800. Though their stage 2 paper is going to be difficult now, but even if they end up not doing well in stage 2, the minimum they would still get is 680, right? And hence, it becomes super important to make sure you do really, really well in your stage 1 paper because you want your minimum threshold to be as high as possible. So your stage 2 is not affecting your overall score so much, right? So I think this is how the adaptiveness works and that's how the scoring works. If in case there are any question, feel free to put it up in the chat section. Happy to take it up at the end. Now let's try and understand individual sections. As I said, there will only be 2 sections, English and math. English entails reading and writing. There are a total of 54 questions across the 2 sections and you have a total of 64 minutes. So each of the sections will have 27 questions and you have 32 minutes to solve with them. The minimum score that you can get in English is 200, the maximum is 800. Similarly, in the math section, you have a total of 44 questions across 2 sections and you have a total of 70 minutes. Minimum again is 200 and maximum again is 800, right? So the overall minimum score that you can get is 400. The maximum overall score that you can get is 1600. Overall, you will encounter 98 questions and you will have 134 minutes, which is 2 hours, 14 minutes, plus the 10-minute additional break is what you will get, right? Now, let's try and understand the individual section, right? So the first section is the English section, which is reading and writing. As I said, it's going to be 2-stage adaptive test design. You will have 2 sections, which will both have English. There are a total of 27 questions. You will have 25 questions, which are operational questions, right? What do I mean by operational question? And then there are 2 questions, which are pre-test questions. That basically means out of 27 questions, 2 questions are going to be experimental. That means they will not be considered towards your final score. However, as a student, when you're attempting the exam, you wouldn't know which are these 2 questions. So you still have to do all your 27 questions with the same level of confidence and accuracy, right? Because you don't know which are those 2 questions which are not considered towards your final scoring. And hence it's important for you to do all 27 with the same mindset, right? Overall, as I said, you'll have 32 minutes per module. In total, 54 questions, 64 minutes. So you have roughly about 1.19 minutes per question. And guys, please do keep a note on this timer because this is very, very important. When I'm talking about ACT, we will come back and reflect back on this number. So in English section for ACT, you have 1.19 minutes per question. But what are they testing you on? As I said, the longer passages are gone. You will have short reading passages. You have to read the paras and answer the questions. Questions largely focus on 4 content domain, which we will see in the next slide. Questions which are testing the similar content domain would be put together, which is again great because you are doing less of context switching. And this is the most important part. Passages represent the subject areas from literature, history, social studies, humanities, sciences. So I think this is the most important part that I've seen students struggling with, right? Most of Indian students, Asian students tend to do well in maths, but I think they really struggle with English, right? And the reason being because we don't read so much, right? And I think reading is a problem amongst us. And I would strongly urge, and my request to the students, if you guys are listening, if you're in grade 9, grade 10, or grade 8, start reading today, right? Start reading as early as possible. That's going to really help you do well by the end of, when you come to these exams. And don't just read novels, right? I mean, that's not going to really help, because these kind of tests will test you on different sort of articles, right? They will pick up articles from different places: humanities, science, social science, social studies, literature. So they will pick up articles from multiple places. So I think it's important for you to start reading. And few recommendations from my side could be, you could start reading Wall Street Journal articles or Washington Post articles, right? Now, why such things? Why have I mentioned these two companies, and both are US based companies? There's a reason for it, right? So I don't know how many of you know, in India, we follow British English, right? However, SAT follows American English. And there are certain changes in terms of rules as well, right? For example, okay, let's look at this sentence, right? Here it says literature, comma, history, social studies, comma, humanities, comma, and science. However, this statement is wrong in British English, right? In American English, if I remove this comma, if I remove the comma after humanities and before and, then this statement is wrong in American English, right? That's one of the important difference between, let's say, the American English and the British English that we follow. And hence it's important that if the student is reading articles which are from Wall Street Journal and Washington Post, they will also look at that grammar difference, and that would really help them to do well by the end of it, right? So I think hence I'm recommending them that they should start reading these sort of articles. Now, what are the 4 content domains in which they test you on? The first one is craft and structure, information and ideas. This is largely the reading section of the SAT, right? Where you need to understand the passage, understand the tone and attitude and rhetorical strategies given in the passage, and then answer the question, right? So this is super important. Again, it's a skill that you acquire over a period of time. If in case you are an avid reader, you will do well. If you're not, then you will struggle in this, and it will require a decent amount of time for you to do well in these sections. The next 2 sections, standard English convention and expression of ideas, they are largely the grammar section of SAT, which is largely testing you on your usage, punctuation, nouns, pronouns, and so on and so forth. So they're largely testing your grammatical skills. And this is an easy skill to acquire. And hence we generally say that within English, make sure you're getting perfect score in English in the writing section or the writing questions or component, because they're easier to score than the reading component, right? So I think that is one thing here. Now moving with the next section, which is the math section. Just like English, there are 2 components, 2 stages, total of 22 questions per stage. And again, just like English, you have 20 questions which are operational, and there are 2 which are experimental questions, but you wouldn't know which are those experimental questions, and hence you will have to do all the 22 questions in the same way, right? Because they are in 2 stages, you have a total of 44 questions, and you have roughly about 70 minutes to solve this. Hence, you have about 1.59 minutes per question, which is very, very important, guys. Please do keep note of this time. For the SAT math section, you have 1.59 minutes per question, which is very, very important, because when I talk about the other exam, which is ACT, I will come back and compare this data. Now, what are they testing you on? Let's look at the topics, right? So they will test you on algebra, which is linear equation, inequalities, equations, system of equations, problem solving and data analysis, which is largely about statistics, ratio, rate, proportion, anything to deal with the numbers. The third one is advanced math, which is everything related to non-linear equation, right? So quadratic equation, exponential equation, and functions, and so on. That's advanced geometry. And then you have geometry and trigonometry, which is all about areas, volume, lines, triangle, trigonometry, circles, and so on, right? So if you really look at it, 2 key takeaways from here. One is most of these topics students would have covered by grade 10, right? So any student who is in grade 10, content-wise, they have covered everything in school. So they're good to write this exam. That's one key takeaway. The second important key takeaway is if you look at geometry and trigonometry, there are only about 5 to 7 questions here out of 44 questions, right? So I think that's only about 10 to 12, 15%, let's say, right? In the best case scenario that you have geometry and trigonometry. So keep this number in mind as well, because when we will look at ACT, we will do some comparison here. So in geometry and trigonometry, you only have about 12 to 15% in SAT. Most of it is algebra, right? So SAT is very algebra heavy and it is low on geometry and trigonometry. So that's the end of the SAT exam in terms of, so we discussed about the section that we have, what are the topics, subtopics, and so on. Now we will move on to the next test, which is the ACT. It's called American College Testing. Before I do that, let me also give you a couple of other details about SAT. SAT is conducted by an organization called SAT.org, and it happens 7 times a year. So exam happens 7 times a year. So there was one which happened in March. There's one which is happening this Saturday in May. There's another one in June, August, October, November, and December. So these are the 7 dates, 7 months where SAT will happen. So it's a digital exam, online exam. You could write this exam as many times as you want. However, we strongly recommend that you don't write it more than twice. Twice is a good number. Beyond that, it becomes a bit too much, unless you're 100% sure that you will do well drastically in your third attempt, right? Similarly, if you look at ACT, ACT is conducted by another organization called ACT.org, which is again a US-based organization. ACT also happens online, so that's the similarity between the two exams. ACT also happens 7 times a year. That's another similarity between the two exams. The results are out in about 2 to 3 days, which is again another similarity between the two exams. Now, having discussed about all these similarities, I think now is the time where we need to look at how are these two tests different. And I think before I answer that, I want you guys to know that I think what is very important, that you don't have to write both these exams. You have to only write one exam. The idea of discussing both these exams today for you to take this call, whether you as an individual would be better off writing SAT or ACT. So when I'm talking about the ACT exam, I'm going to do a lot of compare and contrast between the two exams, right? And I will try and see if I can help you take that call, take that decision, whether you should be doing an SAT or should you be doing an ACT, right? So I think that is going to be my objective for today's webinar. So let's try and look at the differences, right? So ACT is about 2 hours, 55-minute exam, which is obviously longer than the SAT. So that's one major difference. You also have a 40-minute separate essay section, which is an optional component, but you still have it, which is not part of your SAT. So that's another difference. You don't have an essay component in SAT, but you have it in ACT. You have total of 5 sections in ACT, which is again a major difference, because in SAT, you only have 2 major sections. So that's another difference. The rest all remains the same. It's largely testing you on English and maths. And just like SAT, it's required by most US colleges. However, there is one major difference here. Unlike SAT, which is accepted in multiple geographies, ACT is largely accepted in US. So I think that becomes a very important factor when you're picking between the two exams. Should you be doing an SAT or an ACT? If you are very, very sure that you are only going to apply to US, then whether you do an SAT or ACT, there's no difference at all, because all colleges in US, irrespective of any college, any major that you do, they give equal value to SAT or ACT. They don't differentiate between the two exams. However, if you're looking to apply outside of US as well, for example, in India, like Ashoka, Azim Premji, and a couple of other universities, or in Canada, Singapore, Hong Kong, they don't really accept ACT. So acceptability of ACT is lower outside of US than SAT. So that's one important factor that you should consider when you're taking a call between an SAT versus ACT. Now let's look at what are the different sections. As I said, there are a total of 5 sections that you have in the ACT. Sorry. The first section is English. Just like SAT, you have English section here as well. Here, the English section is equivalent to the writing section, which is the grammar section. You have a total of 45 minutes and you have 75 questions to solve. Minimum that you can score is 1. The maximum that you can score is 36 here. Second section is math, 60 minutes, 60 questions. Minimum you can score is 1. Maximum you can score is 36. Third section is reading. Fourth section is science. And all of them, the minimum score is 1. The maximum score is 36. So your overall score is an average of your 4 section scores, and that becomes your final score. So ACT, unlike SAT is on a scale of 400 to 1600. ACT is on a scale of 1 to 36, right? Now, just to give you a reference and concordance table, 1500 out of 1600 in SAT, which is the 99th percentile, is roughly equivalent to 33 out of 36 in ACT. That is again 99th percentile, right? So if you're looking at targeting at 1500 in SAT, you should be targeting at 33 or 34 in ACT. That's the reference point between the two exam tables. Now let's look at individual sections, right? So the first one is the English section, where you have a total of 45 minutes and you have 75 questions to solve. You only have 36 seconds per question. Now, if you remember in SAT English, we had 1.19 minutes per question. That's a bummer, right? I think that's the major difference between the two exams. In ACT English, you have to be really, really quick. Questions are definitely straightforward. They are a lot more easier than SAT, but you have to be really, really quick. That's the major difference between SAT and ACT. And not just in English, right? We will also look at it in other sections. But what are they testing you on? Same thing, right? There is no change in terms of the skills that they're testing you on. Usage and mechanics, rhetorical skills, which is same as the SAT. They're also testing you on the same writing skills, and ACT is also testing you on the same skills. Second section is the math section, where you're allowed to use the calculator just like SAT. Here you have 60 minutes and 60 questions. So you have 1 minute per question as opposed to 1.59 minutes per question in SAT. So you have almost 59 to 60% less time in ACT. And hence, again, you have to be really, really quick in ACT as opposed to the SAT. So you need to figure out, are you somebody who wants easier question, but you're okay with time pressure? Then ACT is the way to go. Or else, if in case you think you need more time, you cannot do well under exam pressure or time pressure, then maybe SAT is something that you want to consider. Topic-wise, what are they testing you on? There is algebra, there is geometry, there is trigonometry. Algebra, you have roughly about 35 questions. And between geometry and trigonometry, you have roughly about 24, 25 questions, right? So I think this is another important point which I wanted to drive home today. There is roughly about 40% geometry and trigonometry in ACT maths. Unlike SAT, if you remember, SAT is very, very algebra heavy. SAT has roughly about 80-85% algebra, whereas in ACT, it's only about 50-55-60% algebra, and you still have over 40-45% of geometry and trigonometry. So again, as a student, if you're somebody who is not very good with algebra, you may want to look at ACT, or vice versa. If you're somebody who is not very good with geometry and trigonometry, you may want to look at the ACT, right? So I think these are another some difference that you need to consider when you're taking a call between whether you should be doing an SAT or an ACT. The third section is the reading section, very similar to the SAT. You have total of 40 questions, you have 35 minutes, so you're roughly about 52 seconds per question. Same thing, you have a passage given here. However, unlike new digital SAT, where you have a para, here you have the entire passage and you have 10 questions per passage, right? So you'll have a total of 4 passages and 10 questions for each passage is what you have to answer. But skills-wise, they're testing you still on the same thing. Again, just like SAT, very, very important that you start reading. If you don't read, start reading articles. Don't just read fiction, read other genres as well. Read social science, read humanities, read natural sciences. I think read different sort of articles, which will help you to do well finally in these exams, right? So that's there in the reading section. And then the next section that you have is the ACT science. Sorry, just 1 second. Yeah, I would request the participant not to. Yes, thanks. The next section that we have is the ACT science section, where we have a total of 40 questions and we have about 35 minutes to solve these questions, which is again 52 seconds is the time that you have. And I think this is an important section, right? This is where a lot of parents, a lot of students get confused that, hey, Rajiv, is there a science section here? Now, my child is not good at science. Should I still be doing ACT? Will I be able to do well in ACT? So let me burst that myth here, right? I think there is no science as such in ACT. It's basically a reading section. We are reading science-based passages and answering the question. That is what is being tested upon in ACT science section. So please don't get worried when you look at an ACT science section. There is no science. It's basically a reading section. We are reading science-based passages and answering the question. It's predominantly a reading section. However, if you know some bit of science there, I think you will always be at an advantage, no doubt about it. But even if not, it's completely fine because you could consider it like an unseen passage and then answer the question. So that's what you have in the ACT science section. Now, what are they testing you on? Largely, I can broadly categorize these questions into three categories. Data representation is one, which is, there is some summary or some data represented from an experiment. Now you need to read that data and answer the question. So that is data representation. Second one is research summary. Now, what is research summary? So somebody would have done some sort of research on an experiment. They have presented the summary of their research along with the data and data points and graphs and charts and everything. Somebody will have to read that summary, understand it, and then answer the question. So that is research summary. And then you have conflicting viewpoint passages. Now, what is conflicting viewpoint passages? For example, let's say I have a viewpoint on a particular topic. For example, let's talk about black hole, right? There are two different scientists who have two different viewpoints on black hole existence. Now that would be presented on the paper. Somebody will have to read both these viewpoints and then answer the question. So that is conflicting viewpoint passages, right? So that is what you have in the ACT science section. Now, if you really look at it, that's how these two tests, SAT and ACT, are different from each other. We have looked at a lot of differences in terms of how the acceptability is, how they are, in one test, you have to be really, really quick. In one test, the questions are a lot more simpler. How there's an ACT, separate ACT science section here. So you will encounter science-based passages. So these are some of the differences that you have encountered. Now, I think one option is just by hearing all of it, you probably would have made up some sort of your mind and some alignment towards one exam or the other. However, at ReWiser, we strongly recommend that you should go and write a diagnostic test. We strongly urge the student to write a diagnostic test, one for SAT, one for ACT. Write this free diagnostic test. And based on that, you figure out what is the right test for you, right? So we offer free diagnostic test to all the participants who have joined the event today. So I think post the event today, by the end of the day, you will get a mailer which will have a link for free diagnostic test. Students can go and write the diagnostic test there, one for SAT, one for ACT, probably on 2 different days, and then figure it out for themselves, which is the right test for them, right? I think that's the right strategy that we recommend to the students, that you write this test, figure out for yourself which one are you more comfortable with, and then go ahead and write this test, right? So I think that is the advice from our side. However, if you still have some questions out, feel free to set up a one-on-one call. We are happy to answer, and help you understand which is the right test for you. So that's about the SATs and ACTs. I'm sure some of you would have heard about this exam called PSAT, which happens and which a lot of schools in India conduct this exam called PSAT, which is called preliminary SAT or a practice SAT. It's literally the shortened version of the SAT, right? It's more like a subset of SAT that you're doing. Few differences. PSAT happens only once a year. That's one. No college will ask you for your PSAT score in the admission process, right? So don't worry about your PSAT scores. If you have done it, great. If you have not done it, it's completely fine because colleges don't ask you for your PSAT score for admissions, right? But then the question will arise, why should we do it, right? Should we even do it? So I think there are various reasons why some people write it. One is, when you write a PSAT exam, because it's happening globally, you get to know where do you stand globally at this point of time. So I think that's one advantage that some people use it for. You also get to know what are the areas that you need to work on. Second, some students also write it because some students apply for summer program, right? For summer school program for building their profile. And some of the summer school program asks you for your PSAT score if you've done it. And if you submit those scores, you might have an advantage or an edge if in case you've done well in those, right? So that is another advantage that you have, or some students write the PSAT because of that reason. There's one more reason. If you're a US citizen, if the student is a US citizen or an OCI card holder, and you are in grade 11, then you should write a PSAT because that's also known as NMSQT, which is National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. So you can get a scholarship if in case you end up doing well in this particular test, but only if you write PSAT in grade 11, it is known as NMSQT, not in 9, 10, 10, right? Because you can write PSAT as early as grade 8 as well. You could write PSAT in grade 8, you can write it in 9, you can write it in 10. But it happens, as I said, only once a year. In most of the cases, there are schools which register you automatically. In some cases, if your schools don't conduct it and you want to write it, you should visit the College Board website, figure out which is the school in your city which is conducting the PSAT exam and then register in that school and then go ahead and write the exam, right? Some schools take it in October, some schools write this exam in March. So these are the two different cycles that College Board offers schools to write this exam. In terms of the content, very similar to the SET, no change at all. You still have English, you still have maths. Obviously, the questions are a lot more simpler here than SAT, but content-wise, there is no change at all. It's exactly the same, and hence, I'm not going deep into it. With that, we have covered all these three exams, which is SAT, ACT, and PSAT. Let's try and get into the third exam, which is the AP courses, right? Which are advanced placement courses. So what are advanced placement courses? I know this topic in itself is a huge topic to cover in itself. I would just cover a very, very small glimpse of it. AP is like a curriculum, right? Like in India, we have IGCSE, IB, ICSE, CBSE curriculum. In US, I'm sure you must know that they don't have a particular curriculum. Every state follow their own curriculum, right? For example, New Jersey will have their own curriculum. Texas will have their own curriculum. California will have their own curriculum. Every state follow their own curriculum. And hence to bring a standardization, there is this thing called advanced placement courses. So these are again offered by College Board. They are considered to be college level courses, right? So the difficulty of AP subjects is equivalent to college level courses, which are being taken when you could write it in grade 9, you could write it in grade 10, you could write it in grade 11, you could also write it in grade 12. There are almost about 28 subjects which are being offered in India under AP, out of which you can pick the right subject that you want to write. But why should I write it? I think that's a bigger question, right? So let's try and understand why should you even think about writing the AP. It helps you to stand out in college admission process, right? For example, think about it, how many people you are competing with, right? So you are competing with your peers, you're also competing with other school members and then other cities and then country and then the globe, right? So you want to make sure your profile is very, very strong, right? So if you have done AP courses, there are multiple AP courses like psychology, world history, calculus, maths, physics, chemistry, bio. It helps you to stand out in college application. It showcases that you've done more than what your peers have done, right? So I think that's one of the reasons why people write it. The second major reason why a lot of people write advanced placement is also because they get college credits. And this is very, very important, right? So what do I mean by that? If you know the US college system, if you want, let's say if I want to graduate and I want to be a mechanical engineer, by the end of 4 years, I need to gain certain credits, let's say 150 credit. Every subject that I take in college, I get certain credits, right? So for every subject, I might get 4 credits, 5 credits. In total, I need to get 150 credits, right? So even before you get into the college, you can actually gain those credits while you are in India itself, right? So it helps you, A, to stand out in college admission, B, it helps you to gain college credit. Now, how does that help? How does gaining college credit while you're in school helps, right? Two things, right? One is, if you've done that, you actually save a lot of money, right? Because in US, you are paying for every college credit that you earn. So for example, let's take an example of AP Calculus BC exam. If you write an AP Calculus BC exam, and if the child is able to do well as in, if the child is able to get 5 on 5, so AP is on a scale of 1 to 5, then you get roughly about 8 college credits while you are in India itself. That means you will end up saving at least about $8,000 to $10,000 while you are in India itself, right? So that's one reason why people write it. Second important reason, if you've done this course, let's take an example of AP Calculus BC, you'll be able to skip some introductory maths classes in college, right? So then you don't have to do semester 1, semester 2, and semester 3 math courses. You can actually skip these courses, right? So that's the biggest advantage why a lot of students write APs, because if you have skipped those courses, then you can actually take additional courses and probably do a minor in the same period of time, right? So you could do a major and a minor as well, right? That's how the AP works. As I said, AP in itself is a big topic. It's difficult for me to cover it today. We keep doing events and webinars and seminars on advanced placement. We will be doing one very, very soon. This year, it's again, AP happens only once a year, which is in the month of May. And hence the planning of AP becomes super critical. For this year, AP is happening in the next 2 weeks. If in case you would like to explore APs, I think start thinking about it from June, July, August. I think that is very, very important time. And I think what is more important, how do you pick the right subject, right? Which are the APs should you be doing? If you're in CBSE, should you be doing an AP or not? If you're an IB, should you be doing an AP or not, right? So these are the questions that should come to your mind. And if yes, then which are those APs that you should pick, right? And if I'm in ninth grade, I can't write calculus AP, then which AP should I write? So you should be thinking about writing AP world history. You should be thinking about writing AP psychology, right? So these are the kind of APs that you should be thinking about writing, right? So I think that's where the personalization comes into picture. Feel free to, as I said, set up a one-on-one meeting with us. We'll happy to sit with you guys to understand individually on a personal one-on-one basis. Because I think there are three major factors on which this thing depends on. You're coming from which grade, you're in which curriculum, and what major do you want to do. Based on these three factors, we could suggest, recommend you what are the right APs that you should be doing over the next 2 to 3 years, right? So yeah, that's about the AP. I know it's in detail, it's difficult to cover it today. So we will do another event and hopefully, see you guys there in the AP at that point of time. With next is this timeline. So I think we have covered all the tests that we wanted to cover. I just want to quickly relay it back to where we started. We said there are 4 major pillars. First one is academics of grade 9, 10th, 11th, 12th, which are important. Second, we talked about standardized test prep. So these are the tests that one has to think about doing, which is SATs, ACTs, and APs, or PSAT. When should you be doing PSAT? You could do it in 9th, you could do it in 10th, you could also do it in 11th. You should be doing SAT in grade 10th or early grade 11th. That's the right time. If you've not done it, you're already in grade 11th and grade 12th, do it as soon as possible. Start preparing for it. Write the diagnostic test, see which is the right test for you, start preparing for it, and write the exam, right? APs, again, you could do it in grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, also in grade 12, right? So you could do it in any of these 4 years. And then the third pillar was profile development, which is happening all throughout the 4 years. And then finally, it's the college application process, which happened in grade 12. So this is where you start applying to colleges, right? So these are the timelines. Again, as I said, these are standard timelines. We are happy to discuss one-on-one with you guys to figure out what is the right timeline for your child, right? For your kid. Because it just varies from student to student, depending on what curriculum you're in, what grade you're in, what are your targets. Next, as I said in the beginning, there are colleges in India which start accepting SAT scores now. And this is the list of some of the universities which are in India which are accepting SAT scores at this point of time, right? So which includes Ashoka, Azim Premji, Flame, Kriya, Manav Rachna, Shiv Nadar, Palaksha. So I think there are a lot of these universities and they are being updated as we speak. There are more than about 40 plus universities today which are accepting SAT scores, and you can find them over here. If you go to the international.collegeboard.org and SAT Acceptance India, you'll be able to find the list of all the universities in India which are accepting SAT scores. So don't just think that the SAT is purely for US. You can also submit it to the Indian colleges, a lot of Indian colleges nowadays. Now with that, we have covered the topics about SAT, ACTs, PSAT, and APs. A quick introduction in terms of how we at ReWiser help students, how our pedagogy works. We divide the program into 4 phases. We call it phase 0, 1, 2, and 3. Phase 0 is about doing a diagnostic test, which anybody can write irrespective of whether you sign up or not, where you write a diagnostic for SAT, you write a diagnostic for ACT, figure out the right test for you, and then you proceed forward in this journey. Phase 1 is where the live tutoring happens, which is live online tutoring. There are roughly about 40 hours of sessions, and every session is a 2-hour long class. And post every session, there are 2 hours of assignment that you need to do. In totality, you're looking at about 80 hours of time commitment during the phase 1. These all are happening live. This is where you're learning new concepts, strategies, techniques, and so on. And you could do this in group setting, you could do it in one-on-one setting. There are various options which are available at this point of time. Once this is done, you move to phase 2. And from phase 2, the program becomes customized one-on-one program for every student, irrespective of whether you're signed up for group setting or a one-on-one setting. This is the point where we assign a dedicated mentor to every student, right? And that's one of our USP, where this mentor will look at student performance from phase 1 assignments, figure out the areas where student has not done well, and on a weekly basis, suggest them what the child has to do on a week-on-week basis to improve on those areas, right? So this mentor will work closely with the student every week to help them improve in each individual section. This is where the student will end up doing a lot of sectional tests, right? So that happens in phase 2. Once that gets over, we move to phase 3, which is largely about the full length mock test, where students will do at least about 10 to 15 full tests before they write their final exam. And every test that they write is a proctored exam. So all the students join us online and everybody will do the test at same point of time. And the moment they are done with the test, they get a detailed report saying areas they've done well, areas they need to improve, and so on. So all of that happens online itself. And along with that, the mentor will continue to work with the student to keep fine-tuning the areas where they've not done well. Additionally, there are score booster workshops which are happening every week, which all students are supposed to attend to make sure they are sitting with the faculty and solving the paper live with them. Right. So this is how our program works. Additionally speaking, every student get access to our digital platform, which has about 50 plus hours of content videos, which they can look at their own pace. About 1,000+ practice question, about 7 sectional tests and 12 full-length tests. That's all that they get on our platform. All the tests that they write are in the digital SAT, new digital SAT format. All these tests that I talked about are our own created, faculty created tests, along with the detailed answer explanation is what you get. Right, so that's the overall that you get. And this program generally takes about anywhere between 4 to 6 months of prep is required for a student. If there is any family, any student who is in grade 10th and just finished grade 10th, or they're about to finish grade 10th in next 1.5 month, this is the ideal time for them to start. The summer break after 10th grade is the best time to prepare for the SAT, if in case you have not done it yet. So feel free to reach out to us and discuss it with the team. They'll be happy to help you out. This is how the overall program works. We also provide you the support for the second attempt if you would like to take that as well. And while we have this overall program, you could also opt for specific program, just English only, maths only, or just the mock test, or just the self-paced program, right? So our objective has always been to give the child what they really need rather than trying to put in everything. So it's a very tailor-made approach for individual students. Depending on what they really need, we kind of offer them. There are students who just come and take just the test, just the 10 mock test series, right? So we do have those options as well. These are some of our laurels in the highest scores, some data. I mean, the highest SAT score we have is 1590 out of 1600. This is from our recent digital SAT we are talking about, which happened in March. Average is around 1450. The highest ACT is 36 on 36. The average is about 32. The highest AP is 515. Average is about 4.6. We offer about 13 AP subjects at this point of time, which is calculus, AB, BC, statistics, physics, all 4 subjects, mechanics, electricity, magnetism, physics 1, physics 2, chemistry, bio, world history, psychology, microeconomics, macroeconomics, computer science. So these are few subjects that we do offer at this point of time. With that, I've covered everything that I wanted to cover in today's webinar. And now I would like to open the forum for Q&As. I will go back and start looking at all the questions that I've encountered so far in the chat section. If in case you guys have any more questions, please feel free to put it up in the chat section and we'll start taking this up. Okay, the first question I have, will the recording for the webinar be available to us? Yes, Ashmit, you will get the recording from our side. Okay, another question from Amita Garg. Test blind means the criteria for the SAT ACT is not one of the criteria during the selection process of that particular university, right? Excellent. Yes, that's exactly right, Amita. For any university which says test blind, SAT or ACT is not part of their criteria for selection. You're right. Another question from Ruhan. When is the best time to take the SAT? I hope I've answered that question, Ruhan. Probably you asked this question earlier. The ideal time to start preparing is when you're in grade 12th or the summer of grade 12. The moment you're done with your grade 10th exam, that's the best time to prepare for it. And then write your exam right after you're done preparing for it. Another question from Aparna. What is strategy behind pre-test question? Nothing, Aparna. Pre-test questions are because they also have to build their database, right? So they need to figure out how are students performing in these questions so that they can put it back into the question. So any question which is a pre-test question today might be an actual exam question tomorrow, right? So they're just trying to figure out the difficulty level of that question by giving it as a pre-test question. That's the whole idea. That's how these adaptive exams work, right? Because they can only make it adaptive by giving more questions to the student. Based on how these students have performed, they figure out whether it's an easy question, difficult question, and so on. Another question, is this test accepted in UK colleges also? It is accepted. There is a place where you can submit the score, but UK colleges don't really need SPSC. So if you're only applying to UK, then you don't have to write this exam. As simple as that, right? Another question from Ruhan. How do we decide what exam to take, ST or ST? I hope I was able to answer that question, Ruhan. I know that you have asked this question pretty early, but that was the whole objective of the today's event. So please do reach out to the team, write a free diagnostic test, see where do you do well, and then take this call, right? Which is the right test for you. On the question from Piyush, why is essay optional? There's no reason for it, Piyush. They realized that, so earlier it was a mandatory thing, then slowly it became optional. I'm pretty sure in the next 1 or 2 years, it will just go away, right? So even SAT used to have the essay component, which was mandatory in the beginning, that became optional. And now it's no longer there. I'm pretty sure the same thing will happen in SAT as well going forward, right? So yeah. Another question from Sharad, how to decide what to do as seriously? I hope I've answered that question, Sharad, through the webinar. If you still have doubt, feel free to reach out. I think Ritvik has shared his number as well. Feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer, and you can write a diagnostic test. And the question from Ashmit, are both SAT and ACT objective? That's right. They both are MCQ, so they are both objective papers. On the question of Bhavprita, what would be estimated weightage of 4 pillars in an admit distance? Academic score, profile, and application essay. Which pillar would be deciding factor if others are comparable? Great question, Bhavprita, but unfortunately, there is no single answer to it. It varies from country to country. In US, probably academics would be about 60%. Your test prep score is about another 20%, and the remaining 20% is your entire profiling and essay, right? But in UK, your academics become almost 80%. In Singapore, it becomes almost 90%, right? So it varies from country to country. And it also varies from college to college within US as well, right? So some colleges will give a lot more preference to test prep, some will not, and some will not give it at all, right? Like test design. So it varies from college to college. It's difficult to kind of put them into a single basket. Another question from Amita, can an Indian student write PSAT in 8th or 9th? How will it benefit her? Yes, definitely. Indian student can write PSAT in 8th or 9th, but I think we did discuss about the benefits, right? I mean, the only benefit is if in case you want to apply for summer schools outside of India, that's the only advantage. The second reason why some people write it, because they want to understand where the child is at this point of time, right? So is the child at 90th percentile, 95th percentile, 50th percentile, 60th percentile? So that's the only advantage. I mean, personally speaking, if you ask me, I don't think you really need to write it, but there are certain schools which kind of mandate it, and if that's part of the school thing, then you might as well go ahead and write it, right? And the question from Ria, if you're doing the IBDP, do you yet take the APs? There's a question from Sharad, what is IBDP? IBDP stands for International Baccalaureate Diploma Program. IB is a curriculum in India which is being followed. So really your question is, if you're doing the IBDP, do you yet take the APs? I would say yes, right? But the only thing is, you have to be very, very careful in terms of what APs do you take, right? So there are different reasons why you would write AP. For example, in IB, there's a way in which you select the subjects, right? So for example, you wanted to show your interest in computer science, but you can't take it in your IB subjects because of the subject choices that you had to make, right? So let's say, for example, between economics and computer science, you could only pick one. However, you want to show your interest in both. So one subject that you were not able to do in IB, probably you could do it in AP, right? So that will be an advantage that you could really look at. That's the way you could use the APs when you're in IB. In some cases, some students and families, what they also do is, let's say if you're not been able to do well in particular IB exam, then you take an AP for that particular subject, just to showcase that, hey, you know what, I've not done well in this particular subject, but it's not like I'm not good at it. I'm actually good at it, but I'm not able to do well for X, Y, Z reason, right? So that's the different ways in which students who are in IB also writes AP and use it. I hope I was able to answer that question. Another question from Amita, AP test applies for admission to US universities only. That's right, Amita. So credit is something that you only get in US. However, UK also look at AP very, very seriously. If in case you have done AP, for example, one of my students recently, he got an acceptance from Cambridge. However, it's a conditional acceptance, right? Now, what is the condition? They said that the condition is if you're able to write 3 APs and if you're able to get 515 in those 3 APs, we will take you in, right? So that's a conditional offer. UK always gives you a conditional offer. Unlike US is unconditional offer, right? So in UK also it is important if you've done APs, because it is considered to be really, really rigorous, right? So as long as any geography, any country which gives a lot of weightage to academics, AP will hold value there. who conducts APs? College Board is the same organization which conducts SET, also conducts the APs. How early should you start for APs? You can start as early as grade 9. Scores are valid for 5 years. So we have students this year who are writing AP exams as early as grade 9. So that's the time you can start. The reason why I'm saying that is because when you write 3 APs, you can actually become AP scholar. And if you write 4 APs and you get good grade, you become AP honors, right? So if you've done that, you can actually mention that in your application. So if you start early, you will have time to write that many number of APs. Otherwise, you'll find it difficult to write that many number of APs, right? So hence, it's important that you start early if you can. Is taking AP useful if you plan to study in Australia? Not so much, Ishi. Only from the perspective of your profiling, it might be, but you don't get any credits there. Another question from Kinjal: which SAT reference book would you recommend as a student entering into IBDP? Kinjal, there's no specific SAT reference book that I would recommend, but if you're looking for any free resources, then maybe Khan Academy is a good place to start with, right? Khan Academy has a free SET course that you could look at. It's a good basic level course to start your practice. But apart from that, I won't recommend any other book. The reason is SET undergone a change, a very drastic change where you have a digital format now, and no college, unfortunately, none of the books like Barron's, Princeton, and all of them are updated or up to date for digital SET because there are a lot of changes which are happening in digital SET. So I wouldn't recommend buying any of those. On the question from Vanshika: SAT taken in high school helps in postgraduate courses? No, Vanshika, SAT is only for undergrad, not for postgrad. Postgrad, you have different exams that you need to write. And the question from Priyanshi Shah: what are the fees for full program? So there are different sort of programs, Priyanshi. What Ritvik will get in touch with you and he'll probably share the brochure with you and all the details, maybe have a call with you and give you all the details as well. Another question from Ritik: how to get LORs? LOR stands for letter of recommendation. You basically ask for it from your school principal, school counselor, school teacher, or if you've done some internship, some work outside of school, you can also ask them for the letter of recommendation. That's how you get it. Another question from Miss Ria: is one easier than the other scoring wise? No, Ria, I don't think one is easier than other in terms of scoring. I think it's all about which one you are more comfortable with, right? If the child is more comfortable with SET, then they should do SET, or if they're more comfortable with ACT, then they should be looking at ACT, right? But scoring wise, they both are pretty much the same. Bhavprita has asked: please share ReWiser program and fees. Definitely, Bhavprita. I think Ritvik has noted down your name, Bhavprita. So Bhavprita, Priyanshi Shah, I think you guys have asked for our program details. Besides SAT and AP prep, do you help with profile building and other? Anuja. So Anuja, we don't directly do that, but we are happy to tell you, suggest you, recommend you other people in the industry who are doing it. Our core focus is the test prep. That's exactly what we focus on, which is largely the academics is what we do. Right? But we are happy to, feel free to again reach out to Ritvik. We are happy to help you, guide you and tell you, they'll give you certain names and you could probably reach out to them and talk to them and see what if that works best for you. Okay, I think I've covered all the questions. Any other questions? Anyone? While other people are posting any questions, I know a lot of people have started leaving already. Thanks each and everyone for joining in today. I think I hope it was a useful, Saturday morning session for you guys. We will also be sharing the link recordings with you guys. Feel free to go through the recording. In case you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to sit with you and again discuss it with you one-on-one. Okay, I got another question meanwhile. Does doing both SET and ACT will make an advantage over the applicant who only did SET or ACT? Not at all, Anish. Not at all. So please don't consider that. Try and stick to one exam. Writing both the exam will have no advantage at all, right? I think what you really need to figure out which is one exam where you think the child would do well, and then stick with it. Try and get the best score in that particular exam. It could be SET, in some cases it could be ACT, but pick one exam and do it. Doing both will not fetch you any advantage over the other. But thanks for that question. That's an important question. Great. I think those are all the questions that we had. Thanks, everyone. Thanks again for joining in on a Saturday morning. I hope the session was useful and I hope it was an informative session. Feel free to reach out to us if in case you need any information from us. If in case you would like to discuss anything one-on-one, again, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to help. By the end of the day, keep looking at your mail. You will get a mail from us, which will have the recording of this webinar along with our brochure and program details and the free diagnostic testing. With that, thank you. Thanks for joining in. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.